In this video, we'll take a look at how to utilize the command line interface function of ArtEngine, which is available in the Studio version of the tool. The command line functionality allows you to run ArtEngine headlessly from command line interface. This lets you integrate ArtEngine into any custom pipeline of your choice, but it does require some knowledge to utilize it completely. As an example, I have a C# application that takes an input directory with single images and points to an output folder. Executing this application will ingest the images from the input folder and process them into tileable materials to the output, without ever opening ArtEngine. This video won't be about the creation of this app, but more how to set up ArtEngine to be used for command line. When installing ArtEngine Studio, you'll be given this option to add CLI functionality to your paths. This allows you to easily call the executable from anywhere. The next step is to create your graph as you normally would. I'll start with my bitmap input, then put this through a mutation at 2K with default settings to make it tileable. Then generate the other PBR maps by using a group of generation nodes: normal gen, height gen, roughness gen, and ambient occlusion generation. I'll composite the graph to view the results. It's also best practice when building a graph or command line to also execute all the nodes before we start outputting the bitmaps. So I'll just select all of these and hit execute. The key to working with command line setups is that whenever you start to output your maps, you need to output each channel separately. To do this, I'll first split my material and on each channel give its own output node. This will eventually end up in an XML file, so I highly recommend you rename these output nodes to make your life a little bit easier later on. I'll just rename them to represent each of the map types. Finally, I can choose Export Graph from the File menu. This will create two XML files. The one that you'll be editing mostly will be the -config XML. The other XML file contains all the graph data, like mutation and generation nodes, which we won't be editing. I'll open this up in Notepad and we can see that the inputs and outputs are located as such. For this to execute correctly, I'll go to the output section and start putting a proper path and renaming the output bitmap to something useful. These paths can either be absolute or relative. If I open the command line, I can now run ArtEngine with the following command: artengine.cli-config, and the name of the config file we just edited. Running this will launch ArtEngine headlessly and process the single bitmap to the specified output folder shown here. As expected, the image was processed into a 2K PBR material. You can always configure this XML file to fit your needs. So from the example that I showed at the beginning of this video, here is a config file that I have. Depending on the app that you're launching this from, you can replace these file names with something like tokens, like I've done here, something like input and output. And through C#, these will eventually be replaced by user inputs. Having command line access gives you the ability to integrate ArtEngine within a larger pipeline, or develop your custom apps to batch data without ever having to open the software.